Okay. And I
Tom,
guess you go ahead.
no, well, thank
Sorry.
you. And and Brian, good to have you with us. You can give us a thumbs up. I can see that you got it muted.
Hey, I'm indisposed. I'm
You're
sorry I'm a
what?
little late. I'm indisposed a little bit, but sorry I'm a little late.
No, no, it's good to have you
All
here.
right.
Um, well, cool. Well, thanks, Tom. And so now we'll get back to the book, and I apologize for the rocky start, but Chris was directing us
Yes.
in chapter 1, section 2, and we're at the second paragraph is a good place to start, I think. Um, and I do think this is an interesting thing. I'm just going to read. Actually, Chris, I'm going to ask you to read
Okay.
that paragraph, but the Bible.
Um, I've got it. Is it? Oh, yeah, there we go. But the Bible we have seen also begins with man as a hungry being, with the man who is that which he eats. The perspective, however, is wholly different. For nowhere in the Bible do we find the dichotomies which for us are the self-evident framework of all approaches to religion. In the Bible, the food that man eats, the world of which he must partake in order to live, is given to him by God and is given as communion with God. The world as man's food is not something material and limited to material functions, thus different from and opposed to the specifically spiritual functions by which man is related to God. All that exists is God's gift to man, and it all exists to make God known to man, to make man's life communion with God. It is divine love made food, made life for man. God blesses everything he creates, and in biblical language, this means that he makes all creation the sign and means of his presence, and wisdom, love, and revelation. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good.
Thank you. So you made reference when you were first talking about this about a difference between your evangelical past. Could you flesh that out, some of that difference out for us a little bit?
Well, I just, it kind of ran, well, we had the secular and the sacred, or, the spiritual man and the carnal thing, which are themes found in scripture, but it didn't seem to look at seemed absent of this approach of just seeing, God in all, God is all, and that created everything. And this kind of, communion with him. And, it's easier to point out and say these things were evil or secular or not good, and this was spiritual. Baptist church, you get baptized, make a decision for Christ, and then if you're really committed, you join, you'd serve God in full-time missionary work as a Baptist missionary.
Right.
And
there's missionaries and people who make money to support missionaries.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was simple yet very profound, and something I think I need to be ongoingly reminded of that.
Mm-hmm.
In my own journey.
What do y'all think are some of the ramifications in your day-to-day life of a change like this in your theology?
What do you mean by change?
From what Chris was describing to what Schmemann is describing.
I don't think I see it as a change. we're fed and I haven't read this, but in what it quoted, we're being fed, but the words would suggest that we get nourished in food, we get nourished spiritually, we get nourished by pretty much the environment around us, and from that we can then derive, I guess, the nature of God, nature of what our relationship with each other should be. I'm going to slow down at this point. Being new to you three and the process, I'm going to be conservative. How's that?
Yeah. What are some of y'all's other of y'all's thoughts?
You know, it's interesting. The early Christians, first, second centuries, were often accused of being atheists because the Christians had no temples to go to. They didn't seem to have a place for doing religion, and that I think is a separation still among us today. That as Schmemann talks about on the next page there, still in section 2, the Christianity really is not a religion; it's a way of life.
Right.
It's totally inclusive. So Christians didn't go someplace separate to be in the religious realm. They were in the religious realm 24/7, and their way of life was what made them Christian, not any kind of religious exercise. And I think that's still a division that's very prominent today. That just as you were saying, Chris, you have the religious commitment, and then you have the rest of your life separate from that, instead of seeing it as an integrated whole. And I mean, that's very reinforced by the American structure, where religion is regarded very much as a thing separate from life in general.
Is somebody talking?
No.
I'm back.
Bishop, yeah, Wynn just finished.
No. Okay, I thought I heard somebody in the background.
After, go ahead.
So what other the last cohort kind of got off to a slow start as well, and just to encourage y'all, like Wynn and I are here to walk through the book with you, and so we'll come with questions and comments or outraged objections. Those are always good. But I think for me, recognizing this one thing that we just read about is do you need to it was pretty substantial change in approach to kind of what you were talking about, Chris, for me, and the idea that the whole world, all of creation, was given as the context for our spiritual life, not that it was somehow just adjacent to our spiritual life, where we had a spiritual realm and a physical realm, and there was the one thing that happens in some place, maybe it's just below the medulla oblongata. Brian can maybe be more precise on the location of the spiritual realm. But you know, you couldn't see it, touch it, or smell it, and you know, so you have the idea of spiritual and carnal, which Paul makes a division between those sorts of ideas, but we kind of transferred that as being the spiritual and the physical or material, which is not the same dichotomy, where the Bible does make a dichotomy between spiritual and carnal, but not spiritual and physical or material. And so understanding that the created world it is the place that where we work out our salvation with fear and trembling. That was pretty substantial worldview shift for me. Looks like you're nodding your head, Chris. I can't see anybody else, but so I'm just picking on you. Would you are you in agreement?
I guess not. But one of the things that strikes me in one of my favorite quotations is the Creed of Nicaea. In it, as opposed to others, say, I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of all things visible and invisible. And having studied physics and a lot of chemistry, the use of visible and invisible are it's surprising to me that anybody in the year 400 or whatever would understand that, let alone a whole collection, several hundred agree to it. But when you look at the world and take it apart, all things visible are made up of pieces like a Lego set. All things invisible, and the invisible, as an example, is gravity. It's invisible, holds the universe together. There's a whole list of those, and that is the spiritual world. And in the spiritual world, sort of is the icing on the cake, or the reward maybe for seeing God in the physical world and in your daily life. And I think that you can try to pilot your personal ship through two separate worlds. But the fact of the matter is, just like we're at sea, there are rocks under the water, whether you can see them or not. So when you go through life, you're going through life in the material world, in the spiritual world, and those are the two major ones in all aspects of the physical world and all aspects of the spiritual world. And one of the beauties and one of the arguments for being a Christian is that that journey is easier because you have less notes to keep. If you have a Christian view and a Christian set of ethics, you don't have to remember so carefully the lies you've told because you haven't told them. And you don't have to be so careful about being in the conservative ditch or in the liberal ditch. You're on the white line in the middle of life. Anyway, that's one of the small pieces of wisdom from a man that's been alive and conscious for more than 3/4 of a century.
Yeah, thank you.
That's my volley. The Christian life, if you follow it and collectively, is easier and more pleasant than any of the alternatives. I think I hear the voice of silence.
Anybody else have Brian, were we talking about the word sacramental last week? Was that in this?
Yeah, so as last week we were talking about sacramental versus sacrament and what the word sacrament means.
Do you recall the stuff that we talked about?
We talked about how the dictionary had fairly abysmal offerings, mainly Christian rite of passage, but really it's a way that God bestows his grace upon us as kind of the overarching definition that I guess we concluded to, but gonna come more into it as we read on in Schmidt's book.
Mm-hmm. As your understanding increased at all over the past week?
Since our talk,
Yeah. As if
um,
you and I didn't talk outside of the room.
right. Yeah, I pretty much finished Schmidt's book via audiobook. I'm going to read it as well. But I think the biggest shift is coming from a mindset of seeing sacraments as something that we do to God in order to appease him, but rather, no, it's graces that he is um, bestowing upon us is a different way of looking at it. And even that I think that goes forward in how Schmidman approaches mission as well. So, but I don't want to skip ahead in the book for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jesse, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I love what Chris was saying, his observations in terms of stepping out of the dichotomy of maybe the bifurcation of material, spiritual, and embracing the world as something that also what you said, Michael, sort of the church in which we are formed. Obviously, the most specific quote unquote thin space of formation is within the church, but God gives the whole world for our formation. And it helps to I'm always thinking through this through a pastoral lens, because while I absolutely 100% love esoteric conversation, and we'll talk about it all day, most of the folks in the church, in our congregations, just won't be ready to interact at this level, at least at this stage early on.
Right.
And so thinking about tie-ins to helping people see more life, more richness, more color in every single day, every moment, in terms of relationship with the Lord and how they're walking with him. So yeah, I really like the observations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I appreciate what Jesse just said, is because when I guess since I'm through the book, or at least listening to it, that's one thing that kept coming to my mind is for many people I know, this book is gonna be very inaccessible to them. They're gonna struggle with this, or just think he's rambling on. Um, Even myself, I'm like, I'm gonna have to listen to this multiple times. But
Right.
when I kind of try to sense his heart in writing these things, something that came to mind is almost like he's trying to write down what a child does automatically towards God. That a child's sense of thankfulness and daddy do it again, daddy do it again, daddy do it again, this joy and approach to life and thankfulness that a child would have. And it's like, bingo, that's how we're supposed to approach faith. But he's having to write it for the adult mind that's been skewed and warped and misunderstood and trying to help us along here. But in the wrong context, it sounds like what Jesse said, esoteric.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I haven't heard anybody put it that way, but it really is a great observation. And and I'm, I think Jesse, you know me as well as anybody, but this would not be a book that we would start a Bible study with, in general. It would be, there's a reason that we start here with this sort of group, because we're looking at people who are already leaders in churches and already have some academic acumen on the subject. And so we want to make sure that we are setting the groundwork of the worldview in which the rest of the class will be held. And for a lot of us, this is just a affirmation or confirmation that we're all on the same page. And for some of us, it is a little bit of a eye-opening experience. And hopefully for all of us, it's a little bit of an eye-opening experience, because it kind of is for me every time I read the book. But to say I've got 2 conversations on my Zoom. I don't know what's going on. Y'all don't hear anybody else talking though on yours? That's
No.
fine.
I hear a little chatter.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But yeah, this wouldn't be a place to start, but just a Bible study or whatever. It is a place that with this group, because after we do Shmeman, we'll spend a couple of weeks on Shmeman, and then we're going to jump into the way of Christ, which is very, down at it's from going from 50,000 feet, jumping down to the ground, and like where does the boot hit the ground type stuff there. And so we want to make sure that we're all starting with the right worldview there. But yeah, I'm this other woman talking is driving me crazy. I'm sorry. I'm glad that y'all.
I can hear her, but I don't know where it's coming from.
Are you guys off your meds?
Yeah.
No, I can hear it too.
Yeah. But
well, it's interesting, Brian, when you talk about the childhood thing, because that's a reaction I had as well when I first read him. That it really helped me understand Jesus' comment that you have to be like little children, which a lot of times you kind of go, haha, but we don't really want to be like little children. He must have some strange meaning there. But this is, I think, exactly what he meant. And so Schmemann unravels us back to that childhood view of the world and the kind of child questions you ask, because he really is going back to the basics. He doesn't give childlike answers. But it really is that sense of seeing the world as a child sees it, that awe and wonder and simple acceptance of an integrated world that makes sense, that we lose once we get older, and once we get into the societal view that this is all divided up. The Orthodox Church even kind of enables that view, because it's a place where all your senses are involved. It's not just an intellectual experience of hearing a sermon and so on. It's involved with taste and smell and feeling and seeing a whole kaleidoscope of things, as well as the intellectual part, and that is the world. It's funny that Orthodox churches are intended to be not a miniature temple; they're intended to be a miniature world. And make the point that the world is the temple of God. And so a lot of times the the ceiling will be painted with stars and a sort of nighttime scene, and all the icons around are all the people in the world, and sometimes animals as well, so that you see yourself even when you are, quotes, in church, that you haven't left the world to do that. You have fulfilled what the world should be about in that process. And that means going back to when you were 3 and looking at the snow. And it means going back to that simple joy when your father was doing fun stuff with you, all that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I noticed more so and stop me if I'm going ahead in the book, I'm jumbling up the chapters in my mind, but when he was speaking of the liturgy and how the liturgy plays out and walking through it, at first I thought he was saying this is how the Orthodox Church is structured and this is how a church service should be structured. And the more he talked, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this was my impression of one time through the book, is that the liturgy is more so almost like a pantomime or a play that we're acting out, that rightly understood is what should be going on in our hearts when we worship. And like we're walking through the steps in ceremony in order to express what in right relationship we are to be doing with God and with Christ. But I may be wrong about that. That's just something that was floating through my mind. So if you want to talk to that.
Yeah, no, I think you're bang on. That the liturgy for Schmemann is a micro version of life itself and life in the world. The liturgy of Sunday is encapsulating the liturgy of your week that you've just finished and preparing you for the liturgy of the week to come. Liturgy in the sense of its original meaning that we talked about a little, I think, last time, that liturgy means the work of God, or the work of the people, sorry. So everything you do, again, 24/7 is your liturgy. You do a liturgy of cataracts, the liturgy of Sunday is a way of pulling that all together, as you say, giving a structure of how it should go, and a structure for offering it to God, and a structure for receiving God's presence and blessing, so that you do your liturgy for the next week. Is that where you were going with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think my initial impression of liturgy is, from the Orthodox perspective, was more, well, darn it, we've been doing it this long and we ain't changing it, and just there it is. But the way, just hearing his heart spoken in his words, it's like, no, he's describing more so something that is internal rather than just a historic. We've been doing it this way and don't go changing type mentality. So
when you see the liturgy through Father Alexander's eyes, you see, first of all, a 4-year-old view. He has an awe and wonder and joy when he's celebrated. And you also see the liturgy more as it was in the 5th century, before people got into the, we ain't changing this mode. And so it gets sort of encrusted with things that don't make obvious sense. But he's way past that, into the bones of the liturgy that are this offering of total joy and receiving of God's love and sharing the community together, sharing the material world, that tastes good as well, as part of God's world and part of, the taste and see of who God is. So yeah, very much your average Orthodox church isn't going to do this for you. You gotta see through that structure to what he saw.
Yeah, I think it was a conversation we were having at Michael's house the other day, where when Jesus meets the Samaritan woman at the well and talking about worshiping in spirit and truth, and how the confusion of, do we worship on this mountain or in Jerusalem? It's like, hold on, it's how you worship and what your heart's doing. So
Yeah, and everywhere is a place of worship. There's no one mountain.
Right.
Yeah. I'm gonna move us to a few paragraphs later in the same section. It's the paragraph that starts with "to name a thing." Starting about the third sentence. That's "so the only natural and not supernatural." And I'm gonna read this paragraph for us. And I'd love to hear your responses, especially in light of what Wynn and Brian were just saying. So the only natural and not supernatural reaction of man to whom God gave this blessed and sanctified world is to bless God in return, to thank him, to see the world as God sees it, and in this act of gratitude and adoration, to know, name, and possess the world. All rational, spiritual, and other qualities of man, distinguishing him from other creatures, have their focus and ultimate fulfillment in this capacity to bless God, to know, so to speak, the meaning of the thirst and hunger that constitutes his life. Homo sapiens, homo faber, yes, but first of all, homo adorans. The basic definition of man is that he is the priest. He stands in the center of the world and unifies it in his act of blessing God, of both receiving the world from God and offering it to God. And by filling the world with this Eucharist, he transforms his life, the one that he receives from the world, into life in God, into communion with him. The world was created as the matter, the material of one all-embracing Eucharist, and man was created as the priest of this cosmic sacrament.
I quoted that the other day in a sermon, so I do like that quote. The Homo sapien, Homo faber, Homo adorans section.
Mm-hmm.
when I read that, I got the sense that he was not exclusively referring to Eucharist as consuming bread and wine, or even that part of the liturgy. I took it, he was saying that all-encompassing thanksgiving as we commune with Christ and the totality of our life.
It's almost a double entendre, like it means both.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he very much means that. But for him, then the capital E Eucharist is again the encapsulation of that universal Eucharist into the particular sort of Sunday liturgy, the Homo adorans, that pulls it together in one spot and directs it properly to God. And it's interesting that First Peter 2:9, that you are created to be priests and kings. And when you're baptized into being a priest and king. You're ordained a priest, and your coronation as a king happened in the act of baptism, so that as a priest you can then offer the world that you are experiencing and living in, and helping to shape and form. And you're king of that world, small as some of our kingdoms are, but whatever is given to us, that we are kings of, in order to do our liturgy and be able in our priesthood to offer it to God. So that Eucharist is absolutely the universal Eucharist of thanksgiving for the whole creation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not separate from the capital E Eucharist at all. It's this, capital E Eucharist pulls it in all together, as I say.
Um,
And Michael,
Yeah.
did the voices go away?
yeah, was that your TV?
It was the radio, two doors down, but now I know.
Gotcha. Well, thank you.
I just had a quick thought, and I'd written in my margin around this section, for some reason, Maundy Thursday, and was just thinking back on that service where it was a meal, but so much more, and this kind of in that command to he instituted, but yet it just went way beyond that. Yeah, that was just kind of my random thought that came to mind in thinking about that.
Right.
And why you have to see, Maundy Thursday through Easter as one, continued specific liturgy or specific action. The cross is hanging, the shadow of the cross is hanging all over the action of Maundy Thursday, and
Right.
And the light of Easter as well.
Yeah. It is at the end of the hour. And I try to hold us to that. I'm not getting off right now, and anyone can stay if they would like to, but I do like to try to let everyone leave at the end of the hour. And so what we'll do is we're gonna continue. There's 3 more sections that we haven't yet hit on in this book, in this chapter of For the Life of the World. And so for next week, and I will try to update the website as quickly as possible, and I will try to get last week's video on there. I think we covered a fair amount of what we talked about last week. We kind of covered again this week.
Okay.
But as you're looking through these next few sections, 3, 4, 5, we'll kind of take them in order. And if there's anything that anybody wants to say about section 1 or 2, feel free to move us back there. We don't have to. We're not racing through these things. We're going at the pace that everybody feels like, hey, I think I've got it at least enough for this round. And as you look through the next 3 sections, 3, 4, and 5, just be aware of coming with a question or a comment or an objection, or I would say maybe an embellishment, like a story about something, or maybe how your mind changed on something, or how you've interacted with it, or something like that. That's something that's not just a comment, but a piece of color, I guess, what it might be. So I don't know what the right term would be, but some way that you've engaged with a phrase or a paragraph or whatever, and then we will work through. We'll start in section 3 next time, and just kind of keep going through. I do think, and maybe even beginning with any of your thoughts reflecting on this section, especially the idea of, I think there's a lot that we can talk about as the man as priest in the world, and what that means. If you've begun watching some of my YouTube videos on the how to Anglican thing, you'll know that when we get to the pre-liturgy video where I'm talking about the priesthood of all believers, a question I ask is, do you know how to be a priest? Which I think is an important question to ask of all Christians. You know, is do you know what a priest is, and do you know how to be one? Because that's who you are. As Wynn said. Wynn, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
No, we're just starting to get into the mind of Schmemann.
Right. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. Like I said, I'm gonna hang out for just a little bit more longer, and if anybody has any continued conversation or questions, or don't have to be related to this or otherwise, feel free to hang out, or otherwise we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Brian, tell your wife thank you for sparing you on your vacation.
Well, I was tasked with getting the family sandwiches, and I was like, oh wait, I'm supposed to be on a meeting. So that's why you may have saw me walking downtown San Antonio, part of that.
That's what I was wondering.
Getting sandwiches for the kids.
Awesome. Well, and yeah, it was fun to see you guys. Hope y'all have a good rest of your trip.
It's been great. Yep.
All right. Till next time. Bye.
All
All right.
Enjoyed meeting you, Tom.
We'll see you.
Yes.
And Chris, I don't know.
Yes, sir.
I was going to be talking to you and to Russ. Our family is going to be passing through Fredericksburg Thursday around lunchtime. If either of y'all are free for lunch, I would love to.
Man, I'd love to see you. Unfortunately, that's about time we're leaving. We're going to the Mustang Islands
We're trading places.
Conference Center for a little Episcopal Church family camp down there.
Oh, cool. And that's a neat place. Have you been there?
Never been before. You know, my teenage boys are less enthused because most of the family's going to have younger kids, and then the weather is not going to be ideal, but it'll be an adventure. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So,
is Russ going to that as well?
I don't know if Russ is going or not. I don't think he is.
Okay.
But we've never been, and just looking forward to it.
No, it's a beautiful place. I checked it out as a potential venue for my the retreats I do.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It doesn't have a chapel.
Okay. That is interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too.
They've got some space I think they use, I guess, for our gatherings or worship. I'm not quite sure. So
right. They took me to a part of their, I mean, it's just like a huge room where you eat and do it's an everything room.
okay.
And they're like, a lot of people sit up here and do little services and stuff. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. You don't have a chapel at the Episcopal Retreat Center.
That's it. That's wild. Yeah.
It is beautiful.
Yeah.
Right there on the beach.
Should be a good time.
Cool. Well, good deal. Brian, y'all got a full day tomorrow of sightseeing?
Yeah, I think we're gonna go to that Whitty Museum or Witt Museum and the Buckhorn. So just hang around town, go to a park or something.
Fun.
until the kids' energy is outlasting ours. So
Where y'all staying?
we're on the Riverwalk in downtown at the embassy
Okay.
suites. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I probably would have preferred Holiday Inn Express, but we need a little bit bigger room for all these kids because once Micah's awake in the middle of the night, everyone's up. So we had to kind of do a little separation maneuver.
Gotcha.
We've got we for those that we've got a 7, 5, and 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old's just coming out of the hump of being a little wild. So, but it's
Right.
fun.
Yeah. Well, what are
Remember
y'all
those
thinking about this book?
days.
What's up?
What are y'all thinking about this book? The Life of the World book.
Lots of epiphanies, some kind of convictions, reminders.
Have you read the whole
And
thing?
just for me, not yet. I'm kind of going back through, but kind of as a Lenten practice, I've been listening to your daily offices 3 times a day, walking back and forth to my office. And then just kind of, to me, it's been great is, okay, what does it look like to live this life of Christ in the world, but kind of sacramentally in light of the Eucharist, and especially reading ahead in the baptism chapter. So it's been a good exercise for me just to kind of continually be thinking about that, and that, it's about a mile each way. So, and I go back and forth for lunch oftentimes too. So I end up, putting in about 4 miles. So listening to you and then reflecting on, what I'm reading in a maybe a focused way during Lent, and just, taking that, I realized I need more than just Sunday. I need just that daily rhythm of the liturgy and, being in God's word and prayer. And it's been great.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful.
I get a lot that as ascetic practices of Lenten, people force themselves to listen to me.
Yeah.
Uh,
By the way, if you go to Trinity on the Border and click on resources, you click on Pray With Us, it says something's jacked up with the URL.
oh, well, I
So
appreciate
you
you
might
letting me
look into
know.
that. It might be user error on my end, but
No, probably not. It's
anyway.
it's probably inattention on my end. So I appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah.
It's the same recording. Whether you go through the trinitymission.org or Trinity on the Border, the bordermission.org, it's the same. It takes you to the same place.
Okay. Okay. Good deal.
Or clearly it doesn't if you go through the Border Mission, but it used to did,
Okay.
as we say down here in the South.
Used to.
Used to did.
Fixing to.
Well, cool. Well, I am sitting outside of some friends' house who have invited us to stay with them. We hadn't seen them in 10 years, so I probably ought to
Good.
go be a good guest.
Go do that. Sorry to miss you on Thursday, but we'll see you next Tuesday then.
Next Tuesday. Yeah. Do you have a new date? Or is that your new date? You coming down here on Tuesday?
No, but I'll see you on Zoom on next Tuesday.
No, I thought that was what you were telling me your new date.
Yeah, I do need to figure that out. So I'll talk with you offline and look at our calendar.
Sounds good.
All right. Y'all take care.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
We'll see you later.
All right, have a great evening.
Thanks. When you got 1 second?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Does he know about the book to read it?
He had the same information everybody else had.
No, he was given the same information that everybody else had. That doesn't mean he has it.
Right. Well, he had it in his. He was giving it to his mailbox. He was given everything everybody else had. I in the first Zoom meeting with him, I was like, okay, this is he may just be getting his sea legs underneath of him, but I really don't want to scare off the other three guys. I don't mind having a talk with them and saying, hey, we're going to give it one more shot. But if there's a lot of commandeering of the conversation, going down rabbit trails that nobody's hunting on, I think we're going to have to figure out a plan B for Tom.
Yeah, yeah, um, uh, he's in another world than the rest of them.
Yes.
Which doesn't surprise me. He is in another world. And if and clearly, if he's not reading the book, that isn't going to go anywhere,
Right.
because the whole conversation is about that. But maybe I think we need to, kind of quarantine Deming where, as a separate thing, because I think working with both him and the other Tom is, and the other guy I mentioned, Victor, all three are very different from each other, as well as very different from anybody else you've ever known. And certainly than the background these guys have.
Right.
And Tom, I think, was struggling. The words don't always come when you're 88. But he also has no context since he hasn't read the book. And so
well, I'm
that
less concerned about context and not reading the book, which is I'm also concerned about self-awareness. When in the middle of that, I got a text from one of the guys that says, you need to steer him towards a conversation. And he had spent like 5 minutes on talking about his different employments in nuclear physics, and nobody had any idea of whether he had a family, whether he was a Christian, whether he'd ever been to church or anything. And
well, that's because the whole answer was a 30-minute answer, and he was just getting started. He would have gotten to that.
Yeah.
But and he has a little bit of self-awareness, and it was, he's kind of saying, well, yeah, I'll leave it for that, or I hear silence or something like, but the other rabbit trail, my heart sank when you asked him to tell about his life in 5 minutes, because I knew that.
Well, I knew that it was going to look at, well, not, I shouldn't say I knew. I had surmised from our first conversation that it would very likely go exactly like it went today. But I felt like I had, what we gave everybody else the opportunity to tell their story, and he deserved the opportunity to do it as well.
Well, you were able to herd him into the abridged version, but that is the explanation for why you didn't hear about his family.
Yeah.
Or he can tell you at great length about his church background. But anyway, yeah, and the other rabbit trails later on were, I think, a pretty direct consequence of not reading the book, and therefore not really knowing what we were talking about. So I have a strong feeling that, like I say, we need to, put Deming in a separate box.
Gotcha. Okay, well, do as far as next step, do we continue having him come to this next week, or do we try to put them into separate pots this week? I can't really handle any sort of conversations. I'm fairly on the road, or then out in the middle of nowhere for 4 days at a family camp as well. So we're either going to have him come next Tuesday, or you'll have to handle the putting them into separate pots.
I would put them into separate boxes as soon as possible.
Okay. Well, do you want to fire an email that's like, hey, what do you think about this as an idea? Or do you want to wait? I don't know that I'm going to have the time to do anything on that until next week. Do you want to handle it, or do you want to wait till next week when I can handle it?
No, I mean, I don't, you're welcome to handle it, but I could certainly send an email saying we decided to, go to cohort 3, which is Deming, and I'll copy Tom Guerra on that as well, so he doesn't feel singled out.
Yeah, you can copy Victor as well.
Yeah, Victor, we haven't, Victor doesn't know about any of this yet.
Okay. All right. Well, good deal. I'm gonna go in and visit with these friends. But I will. I'm planning on being somewhere by our time tomorrow. For the Zoom meeting tomorrow. So.
Okay, so we are going to go ahead with it.
I think so. I think this will be one of the times that Russ has nothing. Usually he's in the middle of his school day, breaking off to do there. And Dean will not be there, and Dan will not be there, but I think the other guys will all be there. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can do it. So it's but I understand if it's going to be messy for you.
Yeah. Well, I may send out an email just to get a roll call, and then I don't want to. Yeah, I'll do that right now. I'll send out an email to get a roll call, and then we'll make the call tomorrow morning.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, sounds like a plan.
All right. We'll see you tomorrow, maybe.
Okay. And that's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right.